everyone, and welcome to the Driven by MADA podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Platt, and joining me today is Scott Fogarty, CEO of the Ridgeback Network Defense System. Thank you for joining me, Scott.
Good to be here. Thanks, Ryan.
Now, Scott, I understand you are a bit of an expert in the cybersecurity and cybercrime world. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I am the CEO of a company that produces software to help deal with the despicable criminals who are trying to take advantage of our economy and our businesses, small and large. So we're a cybersecurity software company.
And we appreciate the work that you guys do. Cybercrime is very, very relevant nowadays, and it only becomes worse. So let's relate this bit to the dealer world. Now, tell me exactly what a cyber attack looks like. I've seen plenty of movies, but I imagine it's a bit more complicated than that is.
Actually, it's not. And really, the important thing here is that even though a cyber attack occurs in a very technical environment, um, people can understand it if they relate to, say, ideas in warfare, for instance. An attack, although it uses technical means, is using many of the same ideas that inform tactics, on the battlefield. So one of my jobs is to help business leaders who aren't technical be more conversant in the challenge so that they can allocate the right resources to solving the problem, addressing the problem, and you know secure their businesses in a way that's consistent with best practice.
Yeah, so let's talk about how dealers can implement this kind of software and what inherent risks that dealerships run by simply doing business the way that they do it.
Right. Well, so first, you'd asked me about what is a cyber attack, and let me draw out a couple of points there. So, um, certainly, cyber encompasses the kinds of social engineering or phishing emails that people get that are trying to induce people to share their credentials or download malicious code. That's certainly one kind of cyber attack. The one that is more concerning to me is when the adversary, we'll call the bad guy the adversary, finds a means to control devices inside the network environment so that they can discover the information that they want to either steal, destroy, or for economic gain, ransom. It's an interesting point because when we read about cyber attacks, what we typically read about in the press is the end result, the ransom that was paid, the volume of records that were ransomed. But there are numerous steps that take place before that occurs that are consistent with a bona fide cyber attack where someone is controlling devices or machines inside your protected network.
So would this be like Wi-Fi networks or other type of maybe payroll networks in a dealership?
So that's an interesting point too, because the dealer is sort of in an interesting situation where they maintain business operations in a physical facility that includes a lot with new and used car inventory. They maintain an office building where they're processing very sensitive customer information. They also have a service bay where they're administering service that also has technology tools connected to it. And then if you go to get your car service, usually there's a guest Wi-Fi to join as well. And so they have essentially a very big challenge because they need to protect all of those different types of functions that are occurring in the dealer and are supported by technology. Additionally, selling a car is a process that many, many people in the industry participate in. You have marketing agents, you have the F&I process. And so think of information that's very sensitive, very personal, that's flying around the World Wide Web to support ultimately the sale of a car. And so it does create a significant challenge for car dealers to recognize that each of those activities contains certain types of vulnerabilities and it makes the job of a car dealer harder than, let's say, you just were a law firm in an office and that's what you did. It's a different range of capabilities that the dealers using it from for IT to support their businesses.
Yeah, so I mean, clearly dealers expose themselves to risks on many different fronts here. So it exists in many, many ways. What can they do to better secure their business and better secure their data?
Yeah. So I actually started to spend a lot more time with car dealers in the post CDK months. And our tool at Ridgeback allows us to see the performance of the network in real time. In other words, we can join the network even from the parking lot, join the guest network, and make observations about the order and hygiene inside car dealer networks. And I think that it's clear that for many years, IT has supported selling cars and supported the dealer, but it has not been the focus of quite enough attention in terms of investing in keeping hardware and software up to date, in terms of making environments that are segmented. What I mean by that is you want to be as sure as you can that your business operations with all the most sensitive information are walled off, if you will, from essentially the guest network, the service bay, et cetera, because any device can be the object of the adversary's intention to control, and by that means get into the network as a whole. So if you wall off the different parts of your business, it's called segmenting it. You stand a better chance of defeating the adversary's ability to move through your systems and control devices and find the data that is so valuable to them, and when they ransom it. So there are actually a number of very easy steps to take. They're not that complicated. We see that there's a big opportunity to do some rudimentary stuff, but of course, car dealers typically don't necessarily have IT support on staff every workday. So, but it is still important for them to pay attention. And I think if CDK wasn't a wake up call, it really should have been, because the CDK event kind of showed the bad guys that the car store environment was relatively permissive. And it is a business, the car dealer generates relative to headcount a very, very large amount of revenue. And so, from the criminal standpoint, they run a form of business as well. And if they can get into systems on a low cost basis and get business interruption to stimulate a ransom payment, that's that's a good business for them. It's criminal, but that's how they operate. So, so there are other steps you can do. And if you think about um, that old joke about two fellows who are walking through Glacier National Park and they come across a grizzly bear, and one starts to tie up his Nikes, and the other says, don't be silly, you can't outrun a grizzly bear. And the fellow with the sneakers on says, I don't need to outrun the grizzly bear, I need to outrun you. There's a lesson in there, which is what you want is you want your environment to be less permissive, less friendly to someone trying to take advantage of you. So make it so that your environment is one that they'll want to go to another one. They'll want to go to the next house on the street, if you will. And now there are techniques, including what we do, that aren't just defending your networks by using detection. That is a huge theme in cybersecurity, which is basically a form of surveillance. But you cannot win this battle simply by watching. So trying to detect people is good. It's an important thing to try to do, but it doesn't actually kick them out. You need people to do that. So there are techniques that are available to make it so that a car dealer's network, in fact, anyone's network, is actively hostile to and actively disrupts the exploitation. And that's, I think, an important step that businesses need to take. In other words, change the cost equation for the bad guy, make it more costly so that they won't be interested in investing the time.
Yeah, those are a lot of very, very, very good points, and thank you for all that information. Yeah, so these dealers they've left themselves very open to these cyber attacks by not implementing some type of firewall, like you said, to segment their different departments. The attack can come from anywhere, really. And these cybersecurity criminals, they operate as a business too, like you said. So they're trying to get the most money with the least amount of resistance. So using a system like Ridgeback, you're telling me you actively not only defend against these criminals, but fight against them, push them out.
Yeah, so what the whole idea behind Ridgeback is that it's the only security tool in the world actually that uses offensive techniques as a defensive mechanism inside the network. And its inventor has an enormous amount of experience doing what we call red team or offensive stuff. And so he understands that the dynamic is not one you can solve by more analysis, which is the mainstream of security. You actually need to take action against someone inside your network. And that's exactly what we do. Um, I think it's important. One analogy that someone who's not technical might appreciate is that in cyber, the attackers are using the tactics of warfare. So, albeit in technical terms, they're using distraction. Using they're degrading the analysis that we do on the defensive side and to take advantage. On the defensive side, we are using the strategies of data science or analysis. So there's a mismatch between the attacker's techniques and what we're using for defense. And if anybody wants to understand that more profoundly, part of what I like to do is bring concerned business folks into the picture so that they can make sounder judgments and, frankly, rest easier. Because if you don't know how to solve the problem, it will be a nagging concern that kind of keeps you up at night. If you know a little bit more about it, you might be able to take the right steps and feel better about your posture.
Yeah. Nobody wants to become the victim of these bad guys. We're all very familiar with the CDK attack that happened last year, and nobody wants to be the next victim.
I want to make one more little point, which is that car dealers are enormously important to the U.S. economy. Uh, the car is an iconic part of American culture, and in that sense, even though they're small businesses, most of them, it's really, really important to our whole economy for this important business to be more secure. And we want to do everything we can to help the dealer make their business as secure as it can be. It's important to our whole way of life, actually.
Yeah, I understand. No, the car industry and the dealership industry is extremely important for the economy, and to have something left unprotected is risky. You don't want to fall victim like CDK did. And that's why companies like Ridgeback exist, so that dealers do not have to worry, especially those that don't have those IT people on site. You guys essentially become their active IT guy. Is that correct?
We provide them with a lot of understanding and a lot of awareness, and also this offense for defense. So it's a two pronged value proposition in Ridgeback. It's understanding your environment, seeing whether you segmented it properly, seeing whether the other security tools you may have in place are doing their job. And then we have this offense for defense to make it kind of a painful experience for the attacker when they're trying to get a hold of your devices in your network.
Right. Now, I hope our dealers take to heart some of this information. You do not want to leave your dealership open to these kind of attacks. It can be detrimental for business. And I've mentioned it before. We all saw what happened to CDK. You don't want that to be you. So please take to mind the systems like Ridgeback and other security systems that exist and the necessity that they really do need to be incorporated into your business if you want to stay secure. Something like this is not a commodity, but a necessity for business. Scott, thanks for joining. I really appreciate you hopping on with me today and providing some of this information. Certainly some things that I, am not versed in. It's nice to have an expert, and I'm sure we can all appreciate that.
Thank you for having me. I'll talk about this challenge anytime I'm invited. I really appreciate it, Ryan.
Absolutely, Scott. Have an awesome day.